My family called my love a fantasy, but their cruel mockery was merely a smokescreen for a secret far more sinister. The truth behind my parents' accident. They never knew that by trying to tear my life apart, they would only lead me to expose theirs. The air in my Aunt Carol's backyard was thick with the scent of hydrangeas and simmering family judgment. It was the engagement party for my cousin, Jessica, the family's reigning princess, and her fiancé, Brad, a man whose personality was as beige as his linen suit. White tents billowed softly in the late afternoon breeze, champagne glasses clinked, and the low hum of polite chatter was a soundtrack to my rising anxiety. I smoothed down my simple navy dress for the 10th time, feeling hopelessly out of place among the sequins and designer labels. It had been a mistake to come alone, a huge, colossal mistake. But I didn't have a choice. "Sarah, sweetie, you made it." Aunt Carol descended upon me, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair immobile against the wind. Her smile was a masterpiece of social engineering, wide and bright, but with eyes that were scanning me for flaws. We were starting to worry, all alone. "Hi, Aunt Carol. The party looks beautiful," I said, forcing a smile of my own. "Liam just got held up. A last-minute crisis at work. You know how it is." Her smile tightened infinitesimally. "Ah, yes, the mysterious Liam. Still so very, very busy. It's a wonder you two ever see each other." Before I could form a reply, Jessica glided over, linking her arm with her mother's. She was radiant, of course. Her dress was a shimmering confection of champagne silk, and the diamond on her finger was so large it seemed to have its own gravitational pull. "Oh, Sarah," she cooed, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Don't tell me your imaginary boyfriend stood you up again. How embarrassing for you." My jaw clenched. "He's not imaginary, Jessica. And he didn't stand me up. He's a CEO of a major tech company. Sometimes billion-dollar deals don't wait for engagement parties." The words sounded defensive and flimsy, even to my own ears. Aunt Carol patted my arm, a gesture that was meant to look kind, but felt like a nail being hammered into my coffin of social inadequacy. "Of course, dear. We all have our little fantasies." This was their favorite game. For the past 6 months, ever since I'd happily announced that I was in a serious relationship, my family had treated it as a joke. I'd always been the quiet, bookish cousin, the one who went to state school, got a sensible master's degree in library sciences, and preferred a night in with a historical novel to a night out. I wasn't glamorous like Jessica, who made a living as a lifestyle influencer by posting photos of expensive brunches. In their eyes, I was the resident old maid at 28. So when I told them about Liam, brilliant, kind, devastatingly handsome Liam, it was simply too much for their tiny, cynical minds to compute. They decided I must have made him up. The interrogation continued for what felt like an eternity. My other aunt, Susan, joined the fray. "So this Liam, what does he look like? Have you got a picture?" I gritted my teeth and pulled out my phone, scrolling to my favorite photo of us. It was taken on a hike a few weeks ago. He was laughing, his head tilted back, the sun catching the stray strands of dark hair falling across his forehead. His eyes, a startlingly clear blue, were crinkled at the corners. He looked happy, real, and completely in love. I showed them the screen. Jessica squinted at it, then let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, honey, that's a stock photo model. I think I've seen him in a cologne ad." "That's not a model, that's Liam Thorne," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "As in CEO of Thorne Dynamics." Aunt Carol took the phone, holding it at arm's length. "Thorne Dynamics? Isn't that the company that's all over the news? The one that just signed that massive government contract? Sarah, you can't possibly expect us to believe that you, a librarian, are engaged to a man like Liam Thorne. It's just not plausible, sweetie." My face was burning. They were speaking in hushed, conspiratorial tones now, but I could feel the eyes of other guests starting to drift our way. They were creating a scene, and I was at the center of it. "Why is it so hard to believe that someone wonderful could love me?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Jessica just shook her head, a look of pity on her face that was more insulting than any insult. "We just worry about you. It's not healthy to live in a fantasy world." I wanted to run, to get in my sensible sedan and drive away, leaving them to their perfect party and their perfect lives. But a stubborn part of me, the part that had fallen head over heels for an incredible man who just happened to be out of their league, refused to let them win. The final humiliation came an hour later. Brad and Jessica were standing on a small, makeshift stage to give a toast. After thanking everyone for coming, Jessica raised her glass, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed directly on me. I just want to say how blessed I am, she began, her voice resonating through the microphone, to have found a love that is real, a love that is present, a love you can see and touch. In a world full of filters and fake stories, it's just so important to hold on to what's authentic. To my real fiancé, Brad. The crowd cheered, but I felt the words like a physical slap. Several of my cousins shot me smirking glances. I could feel my throat closing up, the tears I'd been fighting all evening threatening to spill over. I stared down at my glass of lukewarm water, trying to will myself to disappear. It was over. I couldn't take any more. I would slip out quietly, text Liam that I was sick, and spend the night crying into a pint of ice cream. Just as I was about to stand, my purse vibrated on my lap. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking. It was a text from Liam. My heart sank. This was it. The text saying he was sorry, the deal was taking all night, he just couldn't make it. The final nail in the coffin. The confirmation for my family that I was a pathetic liar. With a sense of dread, I opened the message. It wasn't an apology. It was just 5 words. Turning onto your aunt's street. A jolt went through me, pure adrenaline. Hope, fierce and bright, flared in my chest. I took a deep breath, stood up, and my chair scraped loudly against the flagstone patio. The sound cut through the chatter, and dozens of eyes turned to me, including Jessica's, which were filled with triumphant malice. "Something to add, Sarah?" she asked into the microphone, a cruel smile playing on her lips. I lifted my chin, my voice coming out clearer and steadier than I could have hoped for. "Just that I agree," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "Authenticity is everything." She scoffed, about to turn away, but I wasn't finished. "And my fiancé apologizes for his delay. He's just parking now?" A ripple of condescending laughter went through the family section. Aunt Carol rolled her eyes so hard I was surprised they didn't fall out. Jessica looked at me like I was a bug she was about to squash, and then we all heard it. It wasn't the sound of a normal car. It was a low, guttural growl, the purr of an engine that cost more than my entire education. A sound that didn't belong among the Priuses and minivans lining the quiet suburban street. The sound of a matte black Aston Martin DB11, his car. The laughter died in an instant. Every single head, as if pulled by a string, slowly turned towards the front of the house. The silence that fell over the backyard was absolute. It was so profound that I could hear the tiny fizz of bubbles dying in my Aunt Carol's champagne flute. Every single person, from my snickering cousins to the caterers pausing with their trays of canapes, was frozen, staring at the driveway as if a spaceship had just landed. The Aston Martin's engine gave a final, throaty sigh before cutting out, leaving the world feeling unnervingly quiet again. Then the driver's side door opened. A polished black leather shoe, one that I knew cost more than my monthly rent, met the manicured lawn. It was followed by a long leg in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. And then he unfolded himself from the car. It was Liam. But it was also Mr. Thorne, the man who commanded boardrooms and made Wall Street analysts tremble. He stood to his full height, a solid 6'3" of effortless power, and for a moment he just took in the scene. His dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it in a frustrating meeting, and his tie was loosened just a fraction. He wasn't smiling. He was scanning. His gaze swept over the white tents, the string lights, and the sea of stunned faces. It was the look he got when he was assessing a new acquisition, clinical and sharp. For a terrifying second, I wondered if he was angry about being dragged into this suburban circus, but then his eyes found me, and everything changed. The calculating CEO vanished, and the tension in his shoulders dissolved. A slow, warm smile spread across his face, a smile reserved only for me, and the entire world narrowed to the 50 feet of lawn between us. He started walking. The crowd didn't so much part for him as it seemed to recede, people unconsciously taking a step back as if in the presence of royalty. His focus was so entirely on me that he didn't seem to notice Jessica's jaw hanging open, or Aunt Carol's face, which had gone a startling shade of pale. He walked right up to me, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners, and gently took my hand. "There you are," he murmured, his voice a low, intimate rumble that sent a shiver right through me. "I am so sorry I'm late. The board meeting from hell." Before I could even speak, he leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't a polite for the public peck. It was a deep, lingering kiss, one that spoke of longing and relief and 1,000 inside jokes. It was a kiss that staked a claim A kiss that silenced every doubt, every snide remark, every whispered fantasy accusation that had been thrown at me all day. When he finally pulled back, resting his forehead against mine, I felt a giddy, triumphant laugh bubble up inside me. I was floating. I turned, still holding his hand like a lifeline, to face my family. The silence was finally broken by a strangled cough from my uncle. I gave them my brightest, most genuine smile. "Everyone," I said, my voice ringing with newfound confidence, "I'd like you to properly meet my fiancé, Liam Thorne." Aunt Carol was the first to snap out of her stupor. She rushed forward, her own smile now looking strained and desperate. "Mr. Thorne, what an honor. Sarah, you sly girl, you didn't tell us he was the Liam Thorne. We are just so thrilled to finally meet the man who has made our little Sarah so happy." Liam gave her a polite, cool nod, his hand tightening protectively on mine. "It's a pleasure to meet Sarah's family." His tone was courteous, but there was an unmistakable Arctic edge to it. He knew. In that one moment, I knew he'd read the entire situation on my face the second he saw me. Jessica and Brad finally made their way off the stage, their own engagement moment completely and utterly hijacked. Brad, to his credit, just looked overwhelmed, sticking out a hand. "Brad Peterson, nice to meet you, man. That's some car." Liam shook his hand firmly, his gaze unwavering. "Thorne, congratulations on your engagement." It was a simple phrase, yet he managed to make it sound like a dismissal. His attention then fell on Jessica, whose face was a thunderous mask of forced pleasantry. "Jessica," Liam said, his voice smooth as silk, "Sarah has told me so much about you." Jessica's laugh was brittle. "All good things, I hope. It's just... You're a very busy man. We were starting to think Sarah had just edited herself into your photos. It was a last pathetic attempt to regain control, to frame me as a crazy stalker. But it backfired spectacularly." Liam didn't even flinch. He just smiled down at me, a look of such profound adoration that it made my heart ache. "Well, I'm the lucky one. My schedule is insane, but this one," he said, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear, "is the only thing that keeps me sane. I'd fly across the world to avoid missing a moment with her." He looked back at Jessica, his smile gone. "So no, I wasn't a photo. I was just 5 minutes late." The humiliation on Jessica's face was a sight to behold. She was speechless. My entire extended family was now attempting to subtly swarm him, to get a moment with the billionaire who had inexplicably landed in their backyard. They complimented his suit, asked about his company, about the stock market, their sycophantic desperation a thick, cloying fog. Liam handled it all with a practiced, detached grace, but his eyes kept finding mine, a silent question in them. "Are you okay?" I gave him a tiny nod, a wave of love for him so powerful it almost knocked me over. He saw me, he always saw me, and he had my back. After a few minutes of fending off my star-struck relatives, Liam's eyes fell to the small stage, where the microphone still stood. He looked at Jessica and Brad, then at me. A slow, dangerous smile, one I knew from his business dealings, played on his lips. This was the smile that meant he was about to end a negotiation in a way no one saw coming. "Excuse me, everyone," he said, his voice effortlessly carrying over the renewed chatter. He led me towards the stage, his hand warm on the small of my back. The crowd fell silent again, watching with bated breath. He picked up the microphone. "I don't want to interrupt the celebration for Jessica and Brad," he began, nodding graciously towards them. "But I do want to thank them. Their happiness tonight is a beautiful reminder of what's truly important." He turned to me, his voice softening, the microphone amplifying the raw emotion in his tone for everyone to hear. "It reminds me how finding the one person who makes the whole world make sense is the only real achievement in life." My breath caught in my throat. What was he doing? "And when you find that person," he continued, his gaze locked on mine, "you don't just give her a ring. You give her a promise, a future, a home." He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. My heart hammered against my ribs. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. He wasn't pulling out a phone or a wallet. He was pulling out a sleek dark blue velvet box. It wasn't a ring box. It was larger, rectangular. He flicked it open with his thumb. Inside, nestled on a bed of white satin, wasn't a piece of jewelry. It was an antique, ornate skeleton key, with a small silver tag attached to it. Liam's voice dropped to a whisper, but the microphone carried it to every corner of the yard. "The penthouse on the park. I know we weren't supposed to close until Tuesday, my love. But I pulled some strings. The papers were signed this morning. Welcome home." For a few seconds, the only sound in the universe was the frantic beating of my own heart. I stared at the key in its velvet box, a piece of ornate metal that represented more than just a home. It was a shield. It was a statement. It was the beautiful, undeniable truth of our life together, laid bare for everyone to see. I felt tears welling in my eyes, not of humiliation this time, but of overwhelming love and gratitude. I slowly reached out and took the key, my fingers closing around its cool weight. It's perfect," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I threw my arms around Liam's neck, burying my face in his shoulder, as the curated politeness of the party finally shattered. A wave of applause and excited murmurs broke the spell. It was like a dam had burst. Suddenly we were engulfed. A penthouse on the park. "Oh, Sarah, you dark horse," my Uncle Robert bellowed, clapping Liam on the back a little too hard. "We simply must see it. You must have us all over for a housewarming, a proper one," Aunt Susan gushed, her eyes glittering with a frightening intensity. Everyone was talking at once, their questions and congratulations a chaotic symphony of opportunism. They wanted to know the square footage, the number of bedrooms, the view. They were no longer talking to me, the quiet librarian cousin. They were addressing the future Mrs. Thorne, the gatekeeper to a world they could only dream of. I felt Liam's arms snake around my waist, a solid, grounding presence in the swirling vortex of my family. Aunt Carol was at the forefront, her face a mask of frantic adoration. "Liam, you mustn't think we're always like this. So boisterous. We're just so protective of our Sarah, and to see her with a man who truly appreciates her, well, it's a mother's dream." She conveniently forgot she wasn't my mother. "I always said she was destined for great things, didn't I, Jessica?" She turned to her daughter, who was standing stiffly beside Brad. Jessica's face was ashen. The radiant bride-to-be had vanished, replaced by a woman who looked like she'd just swallowed acid. Her eyes, when they met mine, were full of a pure, uncut venom that chilled me to the bone. "Yes, Mom," Jessica said, her voice tight and flat. "You always said Sarah was a real dreamer." The word dreamer hung in the air, a pathetic echo of her earlier mockery. Brad, looking deeply uncomfortable, cleared his throat. "Well, congratulations, you two. That's really something." He seemed genuinely impressed, which only made Jessica's scowl deepen. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal blur. I stayed glued to Liam's side as he navigated the sea of my relatives with the same effortless charm he used on foreign dignitaries. He answered their questions with polite vagueness, never giving away too much, his hand always finding mine, a constant silent reassurance. I watched my family, the same people who had been pitying me an hour ago, practically falling over themselves to get a moment of his attention. My cousin Mark, who usually just grunted at me, was suddenly asking Liam for stock tips. My Aunt Susan was describing her son's fledgling startup in excruciating detail. It was pathetic and it was glorious, but as the night wore on and the champagne flowed, a new, unpleasant feeling began to creep in. The vindication was souring, replaced by a queasy unease. This wasn't respect. This was avarice. They didn't see me any differently. They just saw my proximity to power and wealth. The moment I'd been dreading and anticipating finally came when I went to the drink table alone. Jessica was there, pouring herself a very large glass of white wine. "Happy now?" she asked without looking at me. "I was always happy, Jessica," I replied quietly. "You were the one who had a problem with it." She finally turned, her eyes narrowed. "Don't play innocent. You did this on purpose. You planned this whole dramatic entrance to ruin my engagement party." I almost laughed. "You really think I orchestrated a $1 billion board meeting just for this? You give me way too much credit. He came because he loves me, and he didn't want me to be here alone, dealing with this." I gestured vaguely at the party, at our family. "He loves you," she scoffed, taking a large gulp of wine. "Men like that don't love women like you. They acquire them. You're his little pet project. The quiet, mousy librarian he can show off to his friends to prove he's still down to earth. Just wait. He'll get bored." The words were meant to hurt, to plant a seed of doubt, but they bounced right off me. I looked at my cousin, at her expensive dress, and her giant ring and the desperate unhappiness in her eyes, and all I felt was a profound sense of pity. "I'm really sorry you feel that way, Jessica," I said, and I meant it. "Congratulations on your engagement." I turned and walked away, leaving her fuming by the Chardonnay. An hour later, as the party started to wind down, Liam and I began to say our goodbyes. We managed to extricate ourselves from the last of the financial advice seekers, and were almost at the edge of the patio, almost free. "Well," Liam murmured in my ear, his breath warm against my skin, "that was an experience." "You have no idea," I laughed, feeling a wave of relief. Thank you. For everything. Always, he said, kissing my temple. We were almost to the lawn. 10 more steps and we'd be at the car, driving away to our new life, to our new home. Sarah, darling, Liam, don't run off just yet. It was Aunt Carol. She scurried over, blocking our path. Her smile was wide and beaming, but her eyes had the sharp, calculating glint of a predator that had just cornered its prey. I'm so glad I caught you, she said, her voice dropping to a confidential, conspiratorial tone. Now that all this excitement is out in the open, there's a small family matter that I know a man of your caliber, she said, looking at Liam, can help with. My stomach turned to ice. I knew this tone. This was the tone she used right before she asked for an unreasonable, life-ruining favor. You see, she continued, completely ignoring my tense expression. It's about Jessica's wedding gift. Brad's family is quite traditional, and we want to give the happy couple a proper start. A down payment on a house, you know, but with the market being what it is, things are a bit tight. Liam remained perfectly still, his expression unreadable. I see. Aunt Carol beamed, taking his neutral response as encouragement. I knew you would. You're a problem solver. So I was thinking, since you two just bought that lovely penthouse, you probably have a very good relationship with your real estate agent and your bankers. A man like you, well, a check for $200,000 is probably just a drop in the bucket, isn't it? She laughed, a high tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. She looked from Liam's blank face to mine, her smile faltering for a second. It's for Jessica's happiness, Sarah. After all, what's the point of having all that success if you can't share it with your family? You wouldn't want us to think you've forgotten where you come from, now would you? The audacity of it was breathtaking. It sucked all the air out of the beautifully manicured backyard. $200,000, not asked but demanded, with a sickly sweet coating of familial obligation. Aunt Carol stood there, her face a plasticine mask of entitled expectation, as if she had just asked to borrow a cup of sugar. I felt a hot, furious blush creep up my neck. For years I had been the insignificant niece, the target of their pity and condescending remarks. Now, in the span of a single evening, I had been upgraded to a walking, talking ATM. Liam's hand, which had been resting on the small of my back, tightened almost imperceptibly. It was the only sign of the fury I knew was building behind his calm facade. He didn't look at me. His gaze remained fixed on my aunt, his expression as cool and flat as a frozen lake. Aunt Carol, I said, my voice dangerously low, you cannot be serious. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Sarah. She waved a dismissive hand, adorned with several gaudy rings. It's a wedding gift. It's what family does. We help each other. And frankly, after the little scene you two caused tonight, upstaging the bride and groom at their own party, I think it's the least you could do to make it up to poor Jessica. The sheer, unmitigated gall. She was trying to guilt-trip me for the very spectacle her own cruelty had created. I opened my mouth to tell her exactly where she could shove her request, but Liam squeezed my hand gently, a silent signal to let him handle it. He finally spoke, his voice deceptively mild. $200,000 is a significant sum, Carol. He used her first name, stripping away the familial title, and I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. You're asking for it as a gift, to help Jessica and Brad with a down payment. Exactly, she chirped, her confidence returning. For their future, a beautiful start for a beautiful couple. A beautiful start, Liam repeated slowly, nodding as if considering it. He let the silence hang in the air for a moment in which my aunt's greedy smile grew wider. Tell me, Carol, he continued, his tone shifting, becoming sharper, colder. When was the last time you helped Sarah? Aunt Carol blinked. What? What does that have to do with anything? We've always been there for Sarah. Have you? Liam's voice was like steel. Were you there for her when she was working 2 jobs to put herself through grad school? Did you offer to help with her student loans, which she paid off herself, a few $1,000s at a time? Did you offer her a place to stay when her landlord sold her apartment building out from under her? Or did she have to sleep on a friend's couch for 3 months? My aunt's face was turning a blotchy red. She had no idea Liam knew any of this. I'd told him these stories over late-night dinners, fragments of a past I was proud to have overcome. I never imagined he'd weaponize them. That's private family business, she stammered. It is, Liam agreed smoothly. And so is this. Sarah is my family now. Her past is my past, and from where I'm standing, it seems this family support is a one-way street. You ask for help, but you don't offer it. You demand loyalty, but you give none in return. You mock her when you think she's alone, and you try to fleece her the second you realize she's not. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, and Aunt Carol was flinching with each one. She looked around desperately, but the few remaining guests were pretending to be engrossed in the hydrangeas, giving us a wide berth. "Now I don't know you," he said, taking a small step closer, his height suddenly seeming immense and intimidating. "But I know Sarah. She is the kindest, most generous person I have ever met. And if you had ever, even once, shown her an ounce of the familial love you're demanding now, she would probably be writing you that check herself, against my advice. But you didn't. You bullied her. You belittled her. You made her feel small in your perfect little world." He paused, letting his condemnation sink in. "So, no, we will not be giving you $200,000 for Jessica's down payment. In fact, we will not be giving you a single cent. Not for the wedding. Not for Christmas. Not ever." Aunt Carol's jaw worked silently, her face a mask of pure, sputtering rage. All pretense of civility had vanished. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "You waltz in here with your fancy car and your big money and think you can speak to me like that? In my own home? You've poisoned her. This isn't the Sarah we know." "You're right," I said, finally finding my voice. It was clear and strong, with no trace of a tremor. I stepped forward, no longer needing Liam to shield me. "The Sarah you knew was afraid of you. She was afraid of not being good enough, of being a disappointment. But that Sarah is gone. You want to talk about family? Family is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down to make themselves feel better." I looked past her and saw Jessica standing in the doorway to the house, half hidden in the shadows, listening to the entire exchange. Our eyes met, and in her gaze I saw not just anger, but a flicker of something else. Desperation. Fear. "You're out!" Aunt Carol spat, pointing a trembling finger towards the driveway. "Both of you, get out of my house, and don't you dare show your face at my daughter's wedding. You're no longer welcome in this family." "Gladly," Liam said, his voice dripping with ice. He took my hand, and we turned our backs on her, leaving her standing there, fuming and defeated, on her perfectly manicured lawn. We walked across the grass to the car, the silence between us comfortable, charged with unsaid things. The cool night air felt clean and fresh after the stifling atmosphere of the party. As Liam opened the passenger door for me, I paused and looked back at the house. The party was over. The string lights seemed to mock the ugliness that had transpired beneath them. As I slid into the supple leather seat, my phone buzzed. I expected it to be a furious follow-up text from my aunt or another cousin, but it wasn't. It was an unknown number. I frowned, opening the message. My blood ran cold. It was a screenshot of an old social media post from my private, friends-only account from years ago, back in college. It was a stupid, rambling, emotional post I had written after a bad breakup, complaining about how I would never find love, how I was destined to be alone, and how I wished I could just invent a perfect boyfriend who was smart and successful and kind. It was embarrassing, juvenile, and deeply personal. Beneath the screenshot was a single line of text. "I wonder what the gossip blogs would pay for this. The story of the lonely librarian who manifested a billionaire fiancé. Seems like a fantasy to me." My hands started to shake. There were only a handful of people on that old friends list. People from college, and my family, my cousins, Jessica. She had been digging, not just for a day, but for years. She had gone through years of my private life, looking for a weapon, and she had found one. Before I could even process the threat, a second text came through from the same number. "You have 24 hours to transfer the money, or the whole world will know exactly what kind of fantasy you're living in." The sleek, luxurious interior of the Aston Martin suddenly felt like a cage. The smell of expensive leather and the low, digital hum of the dashboard display seemed to mock the primal fear gripping me. I stared at the phone in my hand, the screen glowing with Jessica's poison. My fingers felt numb, my breath trapped in my chest. It wasn't just the blackmail, it was the violation. The idea of her, my own cousin, scrolling through years of my private thoughts, my heartbreaks, my silly, youthful despair, all with the malicious intent of finding something to use against me. It was sickening. "Sarah? My love, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." Liam's voice cut through the fog. He was leaning across the center console, his brow furrowed with concern. Without a word, I handed him the phone. He took it, his eyes quickly scanning the screen. I watched his face, a study in controlled emotion. The initial confusion melted away, replaced by a flicker of disbelief, and then his expression hardened into something I had only seen once before, when a rival company had tried to poach one of his top engineers. It was a look of cold, calculating fury. The CEO was back. "She's threatening to sell this to the press," I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "They'll twist it. They'll make it sound like I'm a liar. A gold digger who manifested a fantasy and then trapped you in it. The narrative was so perfect, so deliciously scandalous, it would confirm every suspicion my family ever had, but on a global scale. Liam Thorne, the tech genius, duped by a conniving librarian. I would be a laughingstock. His reputation, the one he had meticulously built on being shrewd and untouchable, would be tarnished. Liam handed the phone back to me, his movements calm and deliberate. He started the car, the engine roaring to life with a controlled aggression that mirrored the look in his eyes. He pulled out of the driveway, away from the house and the lingering stairs, and drove in silence for a few minutes, his jaw tight, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "This isn't about the money," he said finally, his voice a low growl. "She knows we won't pay. This is a punishment. It's a desperate, pathetic attempt to hurt you because she can't stand to see you happy." "It'll work, Liam," I said, my voice trembling. "People will believe her. It feeds right into the narrative they already want to believe. It's too good of a story for them to pass up." "Let them try," he said, his voice laced with ice. He glanced at me, his blue eyes intense. "Do you trust me?" "Of course I do," I said without hesitation. "Good. Then we are not going to cower. We are not going to pay. We are going to do nothing." "Nothing?" I was stunned. "Liam," she said, 24 hours. The tabloids will have a field day with this. Your board, your investors." "My board and my investors know I'm not an idiot," he cut me off, his tone leaving no room for argument. "This is a game of chicken, Sarah. Jessica is betting that the threat of public humiliation is enough to make us fold. She's assuming you're the same person she's always bullied. She's wrong. And she's assuming I'm someone who can be intimidated. She's even more wrong about that." He was right, of course. His logic was sound. But my fear wasn't logical. It was a visceral, gut-deep terror of being exposed and ridiculed, a phantom limb from a past where I was always on the defensive. We drove the rest of the way to his apartment, soon to be our old apartment. In a tense silence, the key to our new penthouse felt heavy and useless in my purse. How could we celebrate a new beginning when this threat hung over us? The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I barely slept. Every buzz of my phone made my heart leap into my throat. I jumped every time Liam's phone rang, convinced it was a reporter from some sleazy gossip site. Liam, on the other hand, was a fortress of calm. He worked from home, taking calls, firing off emails, and strategizing with his legal team, all with a chilling efficiency. He ordered our favorite Thai food for dinner and put on a movie, acting as if it were just another Tuesday night, but I could see the storm behind his eyes. He wasn't ignoring the threat. He was preparing for war. The deadline, 5 p.m. the next day, came and went. Nothing happened. No calls from reporters. No new texts from the unknown number. A fragile tendril of hope began to unfurl in my chest. Maybe he was right. Maybe she had just been bluffing, a final, spiteful tantrum. By 7 p.m., I finally allowed myself to relax. We were sitting on his sofa, a glass of wine in my hand, and I was just starting to believe we had weathered the storm. That's when Liam's personal phone, the one reserved for his innermost circle, began to ring. The caller ID was a name I didn't recognize. "Julian Vance." Liam's expression tightened. "It's the editor-in-chief of the Daily Scoop," he said, his voice grim. It was one of the most ruthless, widely read gossip blogs in the country. My blood turned to ice. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Liam answered, putting the call on speaker. "Thorne. Mr. Thorne, Julian Vance here," a slick, oily voice said. "Sorry to bother you at home. We've received a rather interesting submission. An old social media post from a Miss Sarah Jenkins. It paints a compelling picture of a lonely young woman fantasizing about a man exactly like you, years before you met. The source, who claims to be a concerned family member, has also provided a rather detailed narrative to go along with it. It's a great story. The billionaire and the fantasist has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" I felt sick. I could feel the walls closing in. Liam was silent for a beat. When he spoke, his voice was utterly devoid of emotion. "And what is it you want, Julian?" "A comment, of course," the editor said, a smug tone in his voice. "We're running it first thing in the morning, front-page feature. It's going to be huge. We're just giving you the professional courtesy of a response. Unless, of course, you'd like to make the story go away. A man in your position, I'm sure you understand that some stories are more expensive than others." So it wasn't just blackmail from Jessica. The editor was trying to extort him, too. It was a nightmare. "I have a comment for you," Liam said, his voice dangerously soft. "I'm all ears," Vance said, the glee palpable in his voice. "You're right," Liam said. "It is a great story." I stared at him, my heart pounding. What was he doing? "In fact," Liam continued, a strange, almost cheerful tone in his voice now, "it's such a great story that I think it deserves a bigger audience, a more permanent one. So here's my comment. Go ahead and run it. Run it with the biggest, ugliest headline you can think of, because while you're doing that, I'll be on the phone with my contacts at the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Forbes, giving them an exclusive." There was a confused silence on the other end of the line. "An exclusive? About what?" "About our engagement, of course," Liam said, his voice turning sharp and predatory. "About my brilliant, beautiful fiancée, Sarah, the woman who has stood by me and inspired me. And about how her own jealous, vindictive family has attempted to extort us, using a slime rag like yours as their weapon. It's a story about cyberbullying, extortion, and the dark side of family dynamics. A story about how you, Julian, and your pathetic blog are complicit in a criminal conspiracy. I have this call recorded, by the way. My lawyers are already drafting the subpoenas. The silence that followed was profound. I could practically hear the blood draining from Julian Vance's face. "But that's not the best part of the story," Liam said, delivering the final killing blow. "The best part is the announcement that will be at the end of every one of those articles, the one that will make your little story look like the petty, irrelevant garbage that it is." He paused, looking directly at me, a fierce, brilliant smile lighting up his face. "The announcement of our wedding, next Saturday, a small private ceremony, because when you know, you know. And we're not going to let people like you, or people like her, ruin a single moment of it." He hung up the phone, plunging the room into a sudden, deafening silence. I just stared at him, my mind reeling, trying to process what had just happened. The blackmail, the reporter, the threats, the counter-threats. And then, his final words hit me with the force of a physical blow. "Our wedding. Next Saturday." He turned to me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of love and righteous fury. "What do you say, Sarah Jenkins?" he asked, his voice soft again. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife in 7 days?" I was floating in the disorienting silence that followed his call, my mind trying to catch up to the sheer velocity of events. Blackmail, extortion, a declaration of war against the tabloid press, and now, a proposal. Not our first proposal, he'd done that beautifully months ago on a secluded beach at sunset, but a reaffirmation, a battle cry condensed into a question. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife in 7 days?" My shock dissolved into a giddy, breathless laugh. It started as a small bubble of air in my chest, and erupted into a full, joyous peal of laughter that filled the room. All the fear, the anxiety, the suffocating weight of my family's toxicity, it all vanished in that one moment. He wasn't just my fiancé, he was my champion. He didn't just deflect the attack, he turned their cannon around and aimed it right back at them. "Yes," I said, my voice ringing with a certainty that felt bone deep. "1,000 times yes. Let's get married next Saturday." Liam's smile was blinding. He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulled me off the sofa, and spun me around, my feet lifting off the floor. "That's my girl," he murmured into my hair. "No retreat, no surrender." The next week was a whirlwind. It was the most insane, stressful, and utterly wonderful week of my life. Liam was true to his word. By the next morning, his formidable PR team, led by a terrifyingly efficient woman named Zara, had descended upon our lives. While I was on the phone with my boss at the library, arranging for an indefinite leave of absence, Liam was orchestrating a media blitz that would have made a 5-star general proud. The story broke just as Julian Vance's pathetic blog post went live. The Daily Scoop headline was as nasty as predicted. "Billionaire's Bride. A Cinderella story or a calculated con?" It featured my embarrassing old post, framed by anonymous quotes from a family insider about my history of being a lonely fantasist. But it was a water pistol against a tidal wave. The New York Times ran a feature in their style section. "Love in the Digital Age. Tech Mogul. Liam Thorne to wed librarian Sarah Jenkins after vicious cyberbullying campaign by family." Forbes ran an op-ed he'd penned himself, titled "The True ROI of a Supportive Partner." No, it was a brilliant piece, not just about our story, but about the insidious nature of emotional abuse and the importance of creating your own family. He never mentioned Jessica or my aunt by name, referring to them only as relatives who chose greed over grace. He didn't have to. The message was clear. Zara, his PR guru, had me do one and only one interview. It was with a well-respected female journalist known for her compassionate, in-depth profiles. I was terrified, but Liam held my hand just off camera the entire time. I told my story simply and honestly. I talked about my love for books, for quiet spaces, for my work. I talked about meeting Liam through a mutual friend, the slow, wonderful progression of our relationship, and how his success was the least interesting thing about him. And when she asked about the blackmail, I looked straight into the camera and said, "My past is not a weapon. My feelings are not a flaw. I am not ashamed of being a person who hoped for love, and I am incredibly blessed to have found it." The public response was overwhelming. Our story went viral. I became an overnight symbol for every quiet girl who had ever been underestimated. My private social media was flooded with friend requests, but my public-facing library staff page was inundated with messages of support from women all over the world. The narrative had been flipped so completely that the Daily Scoop took their article down within 12 hours due to the sheer volume of negative comments and advertiser backlash. Julian Vance issued a weak apology about re-evaluating their source verification process. It was a total, unconditional surrender. In the midst of the media chaos, we were planning a wedding. Liam's executive assistant, a miracle worker named Maria, handled the logistics with breathtaking speed. A venue was secured, a stunning private botanical garden conservatory. A dress was found, a simple, elegant sheath that made me feel more beautiful than I ever had in my life. Guests were invited, a tiny curated list of our true friends, the people who had known about us and celebrated us from day one. There would be no family, not a single one. My phone, of course, had been exploding. My aunt, my uncle, my cousins. They all called, texted, and emailed. The initial messages were furious, full of accusations and disbelief. "How could you do this to your own family?" Aunt Carol had shrieked in a voicemail. "You've ruined Jessica. She's a mess. You've made us a laughingstock." But as the tide of public opinion turned so dramatically against them, the tone of the messages shifted. They became pleading, then pathetic. They were being shunned by their friends, mocked in their own social circles. Jessica had apparently deactivated all her social media after her influencer brand deals started getting cancelled. Her authentic image had been shattered. The final message I received from my aunt was a single, desperate text. "Please, Sarah, just talk to me. We can fix this." I deleted it without a second thought and then blocked every last one of them. It was a purge. It was a liberation. The day of the wedding was perfect. The sun shone brightly, filtering through the glass panes of the conservatory and illuminating the lush greenery within. There were only 30 people there, our closest circle. As I walked down the aisle on the arm of Liam's father, a kind, gentle man, who had welcomed me with open arms from our first meeting, I saw Liam waiting for me. He was wearing a classic black tuxedo, but his eyes were only for me, and they were shining with so much love it made my own eyes well up. We said our vows, simple words that we'd written ourselves, promises of love, respect, and unwavering partnership. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Liam kissed me, and our friends erupted in cheers. It was real. It was authentic. It was ours. The reception was a relaxed, joyful affair. We ate incredible food, danced to a live jazz trio, and laughed with the people who truly loved us. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly safe. The judgment, the mockery, the constant need to justify my existence, it was all gone. Late in the evening, Liam and I slipped away from the party for a moment, walking hand in hand through a quiet, moonlit garden path. "Happy, Mrs. Thorne?" he murmured, pulling me close. "Ecstatic," I breathed, resting my head on his chest. "I still can't believe this is real." "It's the only thing that's real," he said, kissing the top of my head. "Us." We stood there for a few minutes, just enjoying the quiet and the feeling of being married. As we were about to head back, Maria, his assistant, hurried towards us, a tablet in her hand and a worried expression on her face. "Mr. Thorne, Sarah, I am so sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice hushed. "But you need to see this." She handed Liam the tablet. It was displaying a live news feed. The headline read, "Tragedy at Society Wedding." My stomach plummeted. I instantly thought of Jessica and Brad's wedding, which was supposed to be happening this very weekend. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Liam's face was grim as he read the first few lines of the article. He looked at me, his eyes dark with a complicated emotion I couldn't quite decipher. "There was an incident at Jessica's wedding venue this afternoon," he said slowly. "It's about Brad, the groom." He took a deep breath before delivering the final, shocking blow. "He never showed up. He left a note for Jessica this morning. He called the whole thing off." The news hit me with a physical jolt, a dizzying mix of shock and a grim, unwelcome sense of karmic reckoning. Brad had left her, on their wedding day. After everything she had done, after the humiliation she had tried to inflict upon me, her own perfect, curated life had imploded in the most public and painful way imaginable. A small, dark part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction, a voice that whispered, "She got what she deserved." But it was quickly drowned out by a wave of something far more complicated, a hollow, aching pity. "Oh my God," I breathed, leaning against Liam. The beautiful, joyful bubble of our wedding day had been pricked. "Why? What did the note say?" Liam scrolled through the article, his expression unreadable. "It doesn't say. The family is refusing to comment, but a source close to the groom claims he had a sudden crisis of conscience, said he couldn't marry into a family with such moral bankruptcy." The phrase hung in the air, a direct and devastating indictment. Brad, the bland, beige Brad, had a backbone after all. He had watched the entire saga unfold, the mockery at the engagement party, the blackmail attempt, the subsequent public disgrace, and he had walked away. He had chosen his own integrity over a life with Jessica and her toxic family. "They're blaming you, of course," Liam added, his voice low. "The article is already spinning it that way, that the media storm you and I created put unbearable pressure on the couple and tore the family apart." I closed my eyes. Of course they were. It was always easier to paint me as the villain than to look at their own reflection in the mirror. I could already picture Aunt Carol, weeping crocodile tears for the news cameras, blaming me for her daughter's broken heart. "We should go back to the party," I said, trying to shake off the chill that had settled over me. "I don't want to think about them. Not tonight." Liam nodded, his hand a warm, steady presence on my back. "You're right. Tonight is ours." We returned to our reception, and I forced myself to smile, to dance, to drink the champagne. But a shadow had fallen. I kept seeing Jessica's face in my mind, not the smug, cruel face from the engagement party, but the ashen, venomous one I'd seen after Liam's arrival, a face that hid a deep, desperate unhappiness. The next few weeks were a dream. Liam whisked me away on a surprise honeymoon to a private villa in the Maldives. We turned off our phones, disconnected from the world, and just existed together. We swam in the turquoise water, read books on the sun-drenched deck, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. It was a perfect, blissful escape, a balm for the wounds my family had inflicted. For 2 weeks they didn't exist. There was only us. But reality, as it always does, was waiting for us when we landed back in New York. We moved into our penthouse, a beautiful glass-walled sanctuary overlooking the park. Unpacking our lives together felt like the real beginning. We were finally home. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, about a month after our wedding, I was in my new study, a room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that Liam had designed as a surprise for me. I was carefully unpacking my most treasured books when our building's concierge buzzed up. "Mrs. Thorne, my apologies for the interruption," he said, his voice professionally smooth. "There is a visitor for you in the lobby. She does not have an appointment, but she insists it's a personal emergency. A Miss Jessica Peterson." My heart stopped. Jessica. Here. The name Peterson struck me as odd. She must have already changed it legally, another part of the perfect life that now lay in ruins. "She says she won't leave until she speaks with you," the concierge added. My first instinct was to say no, to tell him to send her away, that I had nothing to say to her. The thought of her bringing her toxicity into my new, peaceful home made my skin crawl. Liam was in a meeting across town and wouldn't be back for hours. I would be alone with her. But then, a different thought pushed its way through. Maybe this was it, the final confrontation. The chance to close this chapter for good, on my own terms. "Send her up," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. My hands were trembling as I waited. What could she possibly want? To scream at me? To blame me again? To beg? I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked to the front door, preparing myself for another battle. When I opened the door, the woman standing in the hallway was barely recognizable. The glamorous, perfectly polished influencer was gone. In her place was a pale, hollow-eyed woman who looked like she hadn't slept in a month. She wore no makeup, Her usually perfect hair was scraped back in a messy bun, and she was dressed in simple, slightly rumpled jeans and a gray sweatshirt. She wasn't holding a designer handbag. She was clutching a large, battered manila envelope to her chest like a shield. She just stood there, staring at me, her eyes filled with a raw, desperate emotion that was far beyond anger. "Jessica?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. She flinched at the sound of her name. "He took everything," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Brad, when he left, his family's lawyers were ruthless. They had clauses in the prenup. I got nothing. The influencer deals are gone. The sponsorships dried up. Mom and Dad, they're being audited. Turns out Dad was creative with his taxes. The money is gone, Sarah. All of it." I was stunned into silence. Their entire world, the foundation of their superiority, had crumbled to dust. "What do you want, Jessica?" I asked quietly. She took a shaky step forward, holding out the manila envelope. Her eyes were pleading. "I don't want money," she said, her voice trembling. I need your help. I have nowhere else to go. I found this in my dad's old desk. I don't know what all of it means, but I know it involves your parents. And Thorne Dynamics." I froze, my hand hovering in the air. My parents? They had passed away in a car accident when I was in college. What could they possibly have to do with my father-in-law's company? "My parents?" I asked, my voice sharp with confusion and a dawning sense of dread. "What are you talking about?" She pushed the envelope into my hands. It was thick and heavy. "Just look," she begged, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Please, Sarah. It's bad. It's worse than you can possibly imagine. It's about the accident. It wasn't an accident." My world tilted on its axis. The heavy manila envelope in my hands felt like a lead weight, pulling me down into a cold, dark abyss. "What do you mean, it wasn't an accident?" I asked, my voice a strangled whisper. The gleaming marble floor of the foyer suddenly felt unsteady beneath my feet. Jessica's face was a mess of tears and genuine terror. "I don't know everything," she sobbed. "I just found these papers, old business records, letters. It was my dad, and your dad. They were partners years ago, before Thorne Dynamics was even a thing. They were trying to launch their own tech startup." I motioned for her to come inside, my mind reeling. I led her to the living room, my legs moving on autopilot. The stunning view of Central Park was a blur. I sank onto the sofa, placing the envelope on the glass coffee table as if it were a bomb. Jessica hovered by the doorway, looking small and lost in the vast, elegant space. "Tell me everything," I commanded, my voice shaking. She explained in disjointed, panicked sentences. Our fathers had been best friends, brilliant engineers with a groundbreaking idea for data compression technology. They had a third, silent partner who provided the initial funding. Liam's father, a shrewd businessman even then. But there was a falling out. According to the letters, my father wanted to make the technology open source, believing it would revolutionize the industry for everyone. Liam's father and my Uncle Robert, Jessica's dad, wanted to patent it, sell it to the highest bidder, and get rich. There was a huge fight, Jessica choked out. Your dad threatened to expose them, to go public with the original partnership agreement that guaranteed him a controlling interest. He was going to cut them out entirely. The last letter in the file was from my father, dated the day before the accident. It was a formal notice of his intent to dissolve the partnership and sue them both for breach of contract. He was meeting his lawyer the next morning. He never made it to that meeting. He and my mother died on a rain-slicked highway when a truck with failed brakes jackknifed into their lane. It was ruled a tragic accident. Case closed. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were the letters Jessica described, old partnership agreements, and something else. A series of bank statements showing a large, unexplained payment made to a shell corporation, funneled from my uncle's accounts 2 days after my parents' funeral. The final document was a single, faded piece of paper. It was a vehicle inspection report for the truck that had hit them. It had been conducted a week before the crash. The report was clean, but stapled to the back was a handwritten mechanic's note, never filed, detailing a dangerously worn brake line that needed immediate replacement. The mechanic who wrote the note was the sole proprietor of the shell corporation that received the payment from my uncle. The air left my lungs. My uncle had paid to have my parents murdered. He and Liam's father had stolen the technology, the foundation of the Thorne Dynamics empire, and built their fortunes on the graves of their friends. And my entire family, my sneering Aunt Carol, my condescending cousins, had been living off blood money this whole time. The mockery, the belittling. It hadn't just been about class or jealousy. It was about guilt. They had to make me small, because if I ever became powerful, if I ever got close to the truth, their entire world would be destroyed. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked Jessica, my voice eerily calm. The shock was so profound, it had frozen my emotions into a single, sharp point of ice. "Because they're monsters," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "When Brad left, he told me why. He said he overheard my dad on the phone, drunk, after your engagement. He was bragging to someone about how he'd handled your father, and that he'd do it again if he had to. Brad was horrified. He told me he couldn't live with that, couldn't be a part of it." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate plea for absolution. "I know I don't deserve it, but I couldn't let them get away with it. Not this. This is evil." At that moment the front door opened. Liam was home. He walked in, a smile on his face that vanished the second he saw Jessica. Then the look on my face, then the papers spread across our coffee table. "Sarah? What's going on?" he asked, his voice tight with alarm. I couldn't speak. I just pointed at the documents. He came over, his eyes scanning the pages. I watched as his face went from confusion to disbelief to a dawning, sickening horror. He was seeing his own father's name, his own company's origin, tied to an unthinkable crime. The man he idolized, the foundation of his entire life, was built on a lie. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Jessica's quiet sobs. Liam finally looked up from the papers, his face pale, his blue eyes clouded with a pain that mirrored my own. He didn't deny it. He didn't question it. He saw the truth laid out in black and white. He looked at me, his gaze searching mine. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice raw. And in that moment I knew. There was no more fear. There was no more doubt. There was only the cold, hard clarity of justice. "We burned them to the ground," I said. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers and investigators. Liam used his immense resources not to cover up the truth, but to uncover every last detail. His father and my uncle were arrested within the week. The story was even bigger than our wedding. It was a saga of greed, betrayal, and murder that captivated the nation. The trial was swift. The evidence was irrefutable. They were both sentenced to life in prison. My Aunt Carol, stripped of her wealth and social standing, was forced to sell her home and move into a small, rented apartment. Jessica testified against her own father. It was an act of profound bravery that I never would have thought her capable of. She didn't ask for my forgiveness, but in that courtroom, watching her face down the man who had raised her, she earned my respect. After the trial, she left New York, determined to build a life for herself, a real one, far away from the wreckage of her family. The aftermath was difficult. Thorne Dynamics was rocked by the scandal, but Liam, with a transparency that stunned the business world, addressed it head-on. He publicly acknowledged his father's crimes, established a charitable foundation in my parents' names dedicated to supporting ethical tech startups, and restructured the company from the top down. He worked tirelessly to clean the slate, to make the company's future worthy of the genius my father had intended. Our life was forever changed. The truth of my parents' death was a scar that would never fully fade, but together Liam and I found a way to heal. We filled our home not with ghosts, but with the friends who had become our true family. We found our joy not in grand gestures or public victories, but in the quiet, simple moments, reading side by side in the study, walking through the park at sunset, knowing that we had faced the absolute worst and had chosen the light. One evening, months after the trial, I was looking through an old photo album I'd found in storage, one filled with pictures of my parents. I came across a photo of my dad and my uncle, young and smiling, arms slung around each other's shoulders, the whole world ahead of them. For a moment, a wave of sadness washed over me for all that had been lost. Then Liam came and sat beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. He looked at the photo, then at me. "He would be so proud of you," he said quietly. I leaned my head against his shoulder, the warmth of him chasing away the last of the shadows. "They both would," I said, finally closing the album. My past was no longer a weapon to be used against me, nor a mystery to be solved. It was a part of me, a story of love and loss that had, against all odds, led me home. I was not the quiet librarian anymore. I was not a fantasist. I was Sarah Thorne, a woman who knew the value of truth, and I was finally, completely, authentically free.